Oh, hey, we're live. Jeez, it's been 12 seconds in and we're live. I'm sitting here fiddling around. My apologies, everybody. Hey, it's David Spark. I'm the host of the CISO series video chat. And guess what? We're going to start it off. Our topic today is hacking cloud infrastructure. And we're going to start off with our cold open with Travis and Eric going through as many issues with hacking cloud infrastructure as they can in 1 minute. Gentlemen, are you ready?
Ready.
Yeah. All right, Travis is going to start. Here's the countdown. Ready for the 3-second countdown, and then you start, Travis. Here we go.
Too many ways to grant access.
I'm roles.
I am it's hard to manage.
Access policies.
Permissions are fluid.
Azure AD users.
Data flows like water.
Okta Federation flaws.
There's so many services, it's hard to keep up.
How do I configure AWS SSO?
Developers don't know what they need, and security doesn't know either.
What are managed identities in Azure?
Just make it easy and give me access to all the things.
How do I manage boundaries? What are these?
At big scale, things come and go all the time.
Hey, what are service control policies? Are they limit my permissions?
The attack surface literally shifts under your feet every day.
MFA, is it still a thing?
I have
10
no
seconds.
I have no idea what this policy does.
Who has access keys?
Shared responsibility model diffuses responsibility.
Role chains for privilege escalation.
That's it. Andrew, how many did we have for each of them?
That is a tie, 11 each.
11 each. Not bad, gentlemen. Good job. Let's start the show.
Welcome, everybody. The CISO series video chat is ready to begin.
All right, welcome, everybody. Today's topic is hacking cloud infrastructure, an hour of critical thinking about how identity is your front line of defense for your infrastructure. Our two guests, who you just saw moments ago, are Travis McPeak, Head of Product Security over at Databricks, and Eric Gumanovsky, who is the CBO or Chief Business Officer and co-founder over at Hermetic. Huge thanks to Hermetic. They're our sponsor for today's video chat. Thank you so much for sponsoring today's video chat. Here are the 6 different ways you can participate, and this is for the people who have not come before. The people who have come before, they know all this. First, we have the chat room. You see it's lighting up already. 2, you can submit bad ideas. So we want to know what are the absolute worst ideas you have for hacking cloud infrastructure or just cloud infrastructure security in general. Then we also want you to submit your best strategy. So just put good idea or bad idea or good idea, best strategy, whatever, colon, and then whatever that is. You can join us on video at any time by just typing bring me on, colon, and Andrew, our producer, will try to bring on as many of you as possible. You can ask a question at any time or vote for your favorite question also as well. All right, here's what's going to happen today. The first 2 minutes, we will play the speed round, which we just did. Then your bad ideas and questions. Bad ideas already coming in. I love how you got them all loaded, locked and loaded, ready to go for the show. Then we will put up a poll at 20 minutes past the hour of your bad ideas. You'll vote for your bad ideas. You only have 10 minutes to do that. But also at this time, we will switch to good ideas. But you can give us your good ideas now. That's totally fine. 30 minutes past the hour, we will play the Department of Yes. You know how that goes. They have to say yes to your incredibly horrible ideas, and you can't be facetious about it. Vote for your favorite questions. You can do that actually at any time, but we will push it more at 30 minutes past the hour. And best bad idea contenders will face off. So if your 2 are voted up highly, and I pick those 2 to play the Department of Yes, we're going to want you to come on camera to defend why your bad idea truly is the worst. Last questions and final advice will come up, and then we will do our meetup. That's the cybersecurity speed dating, so stick around for that. We make that link available at the bottom of the screen. Next week, our video chat which is August 20th, 2021, Hacking Anomalous Behavior, an hour of critical thinking on when user actions raise the red flag. So that should be actually a very interesting discussion as well. That link at the bottom of the screen, you can click on it at any time during this video chat to register for next week's video chat. Guess what? It will not take you out of this video chat. So you could multitask, which, by the way, I know all of you are already doing anyways. So click on that link at any time during the show to register for next week's video chat. And you should know if you register early, you're eligible to win an awesome CISO Series fleece, which Sander won in the weekly raffle for entering early. So why wait? Enter now. All right, and at the very end, that I'll show later. Stick around for the meetup. All right, That's it. I've done all that. I want to say thanks to my two guests for being patient, sitting through all of that. Let's get to our very first question at hand. All right. The two of them address the many issues, 22 issues that are involved in cloud infrastructure and securing it. By the way, far from an exhaustive list. Let's just start with the question. I'll start with you, Eric. What can happen if an identity is compromised? Explain really also the link to infrastructure. I'm going to kind of skip to two questions here. Go ahead.
Sure. So first of all, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Identities are compromised all the time.
Yes.
And the question, what happens when an identity is compromised? And, in opposed to the on-prem environment, right, when the identity was just another layer of defense, right, you first of all had the networking layers. For someone to really access your environment, they had to VPN in or, move through a firewall and so on and so forth. In the cloud, identity really becomes, in many scenarios, not in all of them, but definitely in many scenarios, the only perimeter. There are a variety of services that are protected only by the identity layer, which means that when an identity is compromised, the threat actor immediately gets access to those services. And the access the threat actor will get is based on the permissions that this compromised identity owns. So those could be small permissions, but in many cases, as we see, identities are extremely over-provisioned, over-privileged. They have way more permission than they actually require, which means many identities have privileged access. And when such an identity is compromised, the threat actor can do a ton of things, starting from actually accessing your sensitive information and exfiltrating it out within minutes, because it's all out there in the cloud. It's not in your data center. That's one. But in many cases, the threat actor can actually spin down your infrastructure or spin it up. Cause you a direct financial damage, because they will spin up, hundreds or thousands of machines and start using those machines to do some crypto mining or some other things, right? They can just host your hostage and turn off your entire production environment and so on and so forth. We're just getting started. So an identity is really today the keys to your kingdom when it comes to public cloud infrastructure.
And let me throw this one over to you, Travis. Are you very identity focused? I mean, we talk about, data is your crown jewels, but do you have to think about identity first before you think about data, or sort of how do you sort of build your sort of security philosophy, I guess?
Yeah, the way I see it is, data is the predominant concern. So this is what I'm trying to keep secure, but identity is the means to an end for an attacker. So, once you have some application security vulnerability, attacker exploits your web app, attacker exploits some other software in your environment. Now they have a cloud presence, and whether they're successful or not in doing the next step of the attack is entirely dependent on the identity, how it's managed, what permissions it has. And it's hard because, it's easy to just say, let's just keep all of the identity permissions stripped down, but applications need to do things, developers need to do things. And so in practice, getting this right balance where you enable developers to have velocity and deliver features for the business, but also have a defensible, perspective, like when an attacker gets in, it's really a hard balance and it moves all the time.
Mm-hmm. So, all right, we already are getting questions in. Please do ask questions. One of the questions was, hello, David. That's not a question. All right. I want questions in the questions. How about I go to my own question for that minute? Okay, so let's talk about the permission issue here, because this is really what it all boils down. You have identities, you have data, and then there's permissions to get access. Either really it's through your infrastructure and ultimately your data. Explain the connection here. Again, it's ludicrously complicated. And how do we make something that's ludicrously complicated less complicated? And maybe you could explain it simply, Arik.
Sure. So you have a user, right? And this user has permissions to a variety of services, right? When you're using cloud infrastructure, it's not about machines anymore. It's about services you're consuming directly from the cloud service provider. And the service could be, here's a virtual machine for you, but the service could also be, here's a database for you that you just have to manage now, or here's the, a storage service for you. And as a user, you would get permissions to those services. For some services, it could be read-only permissions. So for example, you could have a database that you can only read files from, or tables from, or a storage where you could only read files. But you can be an admin on some of those services. For example, if you're an admin on the virtual machine service, you can spin up and down machines, or you can, whatever, you can create new network configurations, and so on and so forth. So those permissions actually determine what you can do in your environment. And they also determine what could be done with your identity if this identity is compromised, and what is the level of access that the threat actor will get.
All right. What would you add to that, Travis? By the way, excellent explanation.
Yeah. So I guess, the way I see it, like the identity is a vessel, and you can put things into it, and those things are permissions. So, you can have a big jug that you take around with you, and if you fill that up and drink water all day, you're going to be healthy. And if you fill that up with whiskey and drink that all day, you're probably not going to be healthy. So this is really, about what do you put in the vessel? The identity is just what you attach things to, and the permissions is the risk posture.
All right. So this came up in your list of 22 items at the very beginning of the show with about IAM exposure, and that's the identity asset management. Explain to me, what is the exposure that we're so commonly sort of, for a better term, exposing? Travis, let me throw back to you.
Yeah, so the service is extremely powerful if you know how to configure it correctly. It's also a foot gun if you don't. There is, I think, 5,000, 10,000 permissions, unique permissions, and it's really hard to know what those permissions do. And so really, how do you express developer intent in a way that allows you to also reconcile, what the developers need to do, what security understands that developers need to do. I think, it's about how do you kind of bridge the gap between what developers need and how to express that in IAM. It's, you say it sounds simple, but then it's way harder to do in practice.
All right, Craig Herter, I think, has the $64,000 question, because this is, I think, what stresses everybody out about permissions. And he asked, what is the best way to curtail user permission creep to alert when the creep occurs? I'll start with you, Arik.
Right. So there are a number of ways you can go about it. One, you can try to set some policies in place. You could say, hey, users of a specific type that belong to specific groups should have permissions up to a certain level, and monitor for deviation of from these policies. So for example, you can say, my developers, they should have power user on machines, but they should not have admin on the account, and they should not have power user on other services, just as an example. Again, maybe it's a silly one. And then whenever anyone in this group is granted permissions that do not fall within the boundaries of that policy, or actually fall out of those boundaries, you should get an alert. Or in some cases, you can automatically remediate and remove those permissions just instantaneously. Now, that's one way to go about it. Another way to address the same problem is to grant everyone very low permissions to begin with, and then provide them permissions in a manner that is called just in time, right? When they need privilege access, you grant that privilege access just for the specific action, or for a specific time period that would allow them to do their job, but you strip them of these permissions immediately after this time passes by. So in this way, you don't actually get to the situation where you have this permission creep, because every time everyone gets back to their normal low privilege state.
And is that how you're handling it, Travis?
Yeah. As Arik mentioned, there's the two approaches. You start small and build up, or you start big and trim down. And in previous roles, we did the trim down approach. So there's a tool called RepoKid that I was fortunate enough to lead, and that's what we did. We just gave a default loadout of permissions, and then after 90 days, we observed behavior and trimmed down to only the ones that are being used.
And what's the pro and con of the two ways of doing it?
The pro for starting small and building up is that you have less attack surface, but it's more developer burdensome. They have to go and request permissions each time that they need them. The pro of the start big and trim down is that it's easy for developers, but you have a longer exposure window.
But let me also throw this out. Would it, starting big and going down, would it be better if you do that way to see what a baseline looks like, or it doesn't matter, you'd see a baseline in either direction? Arik?
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. That would be a better way to create a baseline. It would also allow you to do the reaction better, right, or the detection better, right? Because you can, once you do the start big and trim down, you know what the baseline is, and then you can not only identify deviations in a preemptive way, you can also identify deviation that might be indications of something malicious happening, right? And that's kind of an anomaly detection capability that you can also benefit there from the starting small and escalating. That's more difficult because there is no like behavioral baseline. It's always some forced minimum that you enforce on the organization.
Also, starting small and building up, you need to know what it is that you want to get. And that's the problem, is it's so difficult to know sometimes in IAM. You don't know exactly which permission set grants you what you need to do.
All right, let me go to a question that Ian Pointer has, and it's an admittedly loaded question, and I'm going to amend it a little bit, Ian. So he says, how should organizations best handle onboarding and offboarding? I'm going to amend his question and ask, what are common mistakes they're making outside of granting far too many permissions, because we've addressed that one. What are some common mistakes that are being made on onboarding and offboarding? Eric, you're nodding your head.
So it's a terrific question. So besides granting too many permissions, it's also not really knowing what are the responsibilities of a specific person when it comes to infrastructure. Again, you're onboarding a person. He might be a developer in one team. You don't really know what this person requires, and that goes back to Travis' comment from the previous comment Travis made, that you don't really know what permissions to grant because you don't really know what he requires, right? And that's a very typical problem when you come to large dev houses that have a lot of developers, and they're moving between teams, and you can't really follow that in a very efficient way.
By the way, we have 4 minutes left it's 3 minutes. I take that back. 3 minutes left to get your bad ideas in for the poll. By the way, if you have not clicked the link at the bottom of the screen to register for next week's video chat, please go ahead and do that now. Again, it will not take you out of this discussion as well. Travis, did you want to add essentially worst ways to do onboarding and offboarding?
Not really. I mean, offboarding is just one of those hard problems in security. It's you just say, yeah, just offboard all the people, or like just patch all the things. But in practice, it's so operationally complex that most organizations fail to do that. I get the sense it's similar to like, how some treat backup, but like, oh yeah, we'll get around to it kind of a things. And, it's always a situation of too late. How do you, I guess, build it where it doesn't become an exhaustive practice of, oh, we have to get around to that is sort of built into the process flow, Eric?
Right. So I think the approach Travis advocated for makes a lot of sense, right? You give everyone a very, I would say, rich set of permissions, but then you monitor constantly. And once you start monitoring constantly and trimming constantly, that kind of builds into your process. It builds into your onboarding, offboarding process. It builds into your development process, because you have to remember the vast majority of the identities are not human users. There are machine identities, service accounts, application roles, and they're messier than humans, right? So building that into the process actually makes it easier to follow up on.
Travis?
Yeah, I think, to the extent that you can take all of the identities and just have one root identity, so you don't have identity sprawl, that makes it easier. So you should have a user that gets created when somebody joins the company, and then all of their user accounts should be tied to that. So if the root node goes away, then everything is destroyed. And from the application side, one of the big problems in cloud security is just sprawl. There's so much resources. Yeah. You don't know who owns the S3 bucket or what it was for. So something I'm getting increasingly interested in is, how do you track ownership and keep that up to date? What does it mean to own a resource, and how, who should make decisions on behalf of who gets access to my S3 bucket or things like that?
All right, just reminding everybody, we got 1 minute before the poll is going to come up. So if you've got a bad idea locked and loaded, get it out now, quick. But I should mention that you can keep getting bad ideas in through the rest of the show, because you were still eligible, because the best bad idea, which we determine over the weekend, will win also a CISO series fleece as well. All right, let's get. We got a ton of questions came in. I like this one that came in from Phil Wolf. I saw just a moment ago. How do you manage? And this is an issue we deal with all the time with third parties. And I'll throw it with you, Eric. And feel free, by the way, to talk specifically about how their Hermetic solution deals with this or doesn't deal with this. I don't know. But it is the question of how do you manage permissions across organizations? So when you're doing partnering or you got customers where you need to let someone who does not work within your four walls access to your cloud profiles, how do you handle this? Eric.
Right. So it's an amazing question. So first of all, you have to be aware of all the third parties that have access to your cloud infrastructure. Let's start from that. And that in itself, a very, very challenging question in cloud infrastructure, because even if you map all your identities, understanding which identities trust something outside your infrastructure is something that's not trivial to answer. Actually, in Hermetic, we give visibility into that immediately, because what we've seen with many of our customers, that because they were not aware of the identities they have that trust, external parties, they have actually granted third parties very sensitive access to their environment. And in some cases, they didn't even know that the third party had this access, or in some cases, they did know that the third party has the access, but they did not know how sensitive this access was. So they thought, okay, they have some access to some metadata. It's a security vendor we're working with that, again, gives us visibility to all our assets in cloud infrastructure. But in fact, that third party, that vendor could get, root or, admin access to their environment. And, from a security perspective, this is mind blowing, right? You actually entrust someone like a random vendor with admin privileges to your environment, and they basically own all your data, all your infrastructure. They can turn your business, shut it down tomorrow, and you would never know how it actually happened. So getting visibility to that is key. After you get the visibility, that's where you can start being able to enforce some policies. And again, this is something that we at Hermetic help automate, saying, okay, I do allow these vendors to get this level of privilege, and I allow these third parties, or I forbid these third parties from ever getting these specific permissions that are more sensitive, and so on and so forth. So getting visibility and then enforcing policies is kind of the way to go from my perspective.
All right. Travis, go ahead. You're about to add.
Yeah, to add on to what Ark said. So two things. One time, a lot of times vendors will ask for way more permissions than they need. They ask for this giant policy, and then if you actually push on them, like which of these do you need, then you get a trimmed down list. So definitely do that. Like have them justify why they need each and every permission. Hermetic can obviously help with this based on the visibility aspect of it, and then do it based on roles. Don't give them user creds, because if you give them static user keys, then one of their people leaves the company and they still have access to your environment. You want this done based on roles so you can offboard, like we were talking about earlier.
So let me ask specifically for you, Travis. For when did you start using Hermetic? How long ago?
I'm actually not a Hermetic user currently.
Oh, you're not? I'm sorry, I thought you were.
I've been involved in the design process throughout. I think Hermetic is a really cool product, and it reminds me of some of the work I've done with RepoKit, but I'm not a current user.
Okay. So give me an idea of a before and after situation in terms of if you're not dealing with this, especially we can stay on third parties too, how are you going to be managing the situation without a tool like this?
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, you need to do some kind of auditing. You would need to go and pull a list of access and who's using it, try to correlate that with Access Advisor data. Having a central pane of glass where you can just go and audit the access like Hermetic provides it's at bare minimum, it's going to cut down on your security ops load. And I think a lot of companies find this too hard and too expensive, and so they just give up and don't do it, which is pretty bad for the security of your environment.
Well, yeah, I mean, as we're constantly hearing with tools like this, what you're doing is you've got this monumental task and you're trying to just simplify what is, like everyone knows what the task is at hand. And when it looks so daunting, sometimes the attitude is, well, we don't have the bodies, the time to solve this. So we don't. Let's solve something we can solve. And then this giant gaping hole sits there and nobody deals with it, which this seems like kind of a recurring theme that we see again and again. Let me remind everybody that we do have the poll up. So please vote it, and you have exactly 6 more minutes to vote for your favorite bad idea. Go ahead and do that right now. All right, more questions that have come in that I want you to vote for. Okay, here this one got voted up. This comes from AJ. identity is key for access to cloud infrastructure. Why don't we enable privileged access to all users to cloud, which essentially is what we were just talking about seconds ago, Arik? Yes, I mean, that is the way to do it, right?
It is the way to do it. The problem is when people talk about privileged access, they think about traditional on-prem solutions that supported that. The problem with those traditional solutions that they do not translate well to the cloud, because these solutions are very much focused on privileged access to machines. And again, those could be Windows machines, or servers, or Linux servers, in some cases, databases as well. But in the cloud, it's all about services. Now, when we started building Hermetic, only the AWS cloud had almost 200 services. They have passed 250 over the past 2 years. And we're talking about Amazon only. If you add to that all the Azure services and GCP services, which are only the top 3 cloud service providers, you have a few smaller ones as well. We're getting to many hundreds of services. None of the privileged access management solutions like traditional vendors like that did that on-prem support any of that. So that's why there is a need for innovation in this space, and that's one of the reasons we decided to build Hermetic, and we have some people like Travis supporting us in this process.
All right, Travis, I got a question for you here. This one comes from Larry Rosen. In your opinion, is cloud infrastructure inherently more or less secure out of the box than an on-premises model? And in addition to that, so answer yay or nay on that. And is there a difference between the way the big 3, AWS, Azure, Google, default the way they deploy cloud? What do you think?
Inherently more secure. Amazon's security team is almost certainly better than your security team. So they do a really good job of maintaining the infrastructure, making sure that all the boxes are checked, getting compliance, securing their data center. This is all things that most companies would have a very hard time doing, and Amazon can do it. Google can do it, Azure can do it because they're huge.
All right, and I've heard that answer many times. Arik, you got a quick response to that?
Yes, absolutely. I remember before Hermetic, I was working as a cybersecurity consultant supporting, Fortune 100 companies in their strategy. And I remember I was advising a large company in their cloud migration. And it was like 5 years ago, and they were really concerned. How do we take our infrastructure and put it in the hands of others? And I told them, guys, your business is to do very cool drinks. Your business is not to protect infrastructure and IT infrastructure. Give it to someone who actually knows how to do it very well, exceptionally well. That's their business, and pay for that. It will be cheaper than for you to do that, and that's not your expertise. So everyone should be, focused on what they are good at.
And I agree wholeheartedly. Hey, I got an interesting comment from Sander here, and Sander, I forget how to pronounce your last name, so I'm not going to even try because I know I'm going to butcher it. But this is akin to the question that I asked earlier about partners and customers and whatnot, but specifically during a merger and acquisition. So how do you manage cloud infrastructure security during an M&A? And my feeling is we're talking about audit process, things like that. I mean, what is the best way to handle it? Because, you would also include the stuff you said earlier. But Travis, what say you on that?
Yeah, I really, during an M&A, you want to know what you're buying potentially, right? So you need to kind of come in and do a lightweight assessment, see what kind of exposure they have. Is there significant risk? Are you likely to have, some kind of an issue before you get a chance to mitigate it? So yeah, I'm in favor of doing, an audit, like really understanding the attack surface of the current cloud environment, and do it as quickly as possible, because M&As don't wait for comprehensive cloud security reviews.
Oh, that is a really good point, Arik. By the way, have you had an experience, either of you, with an M&A?
Of course, multiple experiences, right? And that's basically one of the very interesting use cases where people are using Hermetic, because in the cloud you can actually do a pretty rapid security assessment, which is on-premise basically impossible, right? You cannot go into those data centers and start listing all the equipment they have. In the cloud, you can just deploy a tool like Hermetic, and within hours, you get a very good understanding of what the key risk exposures are across their networking configuration, identity vulnerabilities, and so on and so forth. So you know actually pretty quickly what you're getting yourself into. Especially many organizations are struggling because the shortage of expertise in cloud in general is a problem, right? And let's say you're a large organization and you have you've gone with AWS and you've built expertise in AWS, and now you're buying a shop and you're buying that for business reasons, and you're not involved in as IT or security, you're not always involved in the process, and then you realize that you're going to onboard a huge Azure environment and you don't have anyone in your organization who really understands Azure and Azure security. For you to run an assessment, it's really mind-blowing. Now you can go ahead and deploy a tool like Hermetic, and you're getting answers in a very cloud-agnostic language that really helps you understand what the big problems are and how to address those problems head-on after you or during the M&A or after the M&A process.
All right, we got a call just came in.
Hello, welcome to the Department of Yes, where no request is ever rejected.
All right, we are at the best bad idea thing, and I have not actually even looked at all of these, but I'm just going to go to the two that are most voted up right now. That one of them's not even a bad idea. So hold it. Oh, this is a good one. I like this one. Travis, I'm throwing it out to you. So these are bad ideas. You have to say yes to them, explain why you want to do them, and I will vote on whether I like your answer or not. Here we go. And by the way, speak up if this is your bad idea. And I didn't mention earlier at 20 minutes past, I was saying good ideas. So I see some good ideas have come in, and we want to hear your good ideas too, because I know you all have bad ideas, but a few of you have good ideas as well. Here we go. Speak up if this is yours. Turn off all permissions over the weekend and reactivate based on trouble tickets. So ticket-based access control. I love this idea. Travis, why do you want to do this?
Well, you're immediately going to catch anybody at the company that was offboarded or wasn't offboarded successfully, because they won't come back. It's a great way to right-size your environment. Permissions go away. You cut down risk, and the best things are really executed over a weekend. So I love the timing of this.
Good answer. All right, Eric, I want to see you one up that one. Turn off all permissions over the weekend and reactivate based on trouble tickets. Whose was that? Anyways, Eric, give us your answer, and we're going to find out whose that was.
Right. So I think actually doing that based on tickets is a great idea, because you can really see who's working in the organization, and you grant them more and more permissions. The more work they do, they get more permissions. And if someone is slacking, they won't get any permissions. And after some time, like Travis said, they will be eliminated from the infrastructure altogether. So you one less user to worry about.
All right. I'll give it to you. Hooray! Good job. All right. This is voted up, but we're not going to do this one because it is not a bad idea. I don't know what it is exactly. Secure the cloud, doesn't the CSP do that? So just relying on the CSP, but I'm going to give you a different one here. Okay, Pay Revel, that would be the ransomware gang. First was Phil Wolf. Okay, Phil was that first one. So here, I'm going to throw this to you, Eric. You're going to answer this one. Pay Revel to consult on how you build out your cloud infrastructure. So essentially, pay a ransomware gang. We've seen this before. Not the first time we've seen a black hat hacker go white hack. But that's not saying that they're going to go white hack. They are currently black hat. Are you hiring a black hat hacker, specifically a ransomware hacker, to consult with Eric?
Sure, why not? It's very easy to deploy a cloud infrastructure from scratch if you're using, for example, infrastructure as code. So you can spin up your environment, give it to a black hacker, see what they can do, and then correct it and spin it up again, right? It's all there in your infrastructure as code. It might take you a few hours to redeploy it, as opposed to on-prem where you couldn't do it at all. So maybe
now you're not worried about any potential back doors that they threw in here. Are you at this point?
No, because it's a different infrastructure.
All right. Well, there we go. Different infrastructure. Yes! There we go. How are we handling this one, Travis?
So these are experts. They definitely know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. They've seen this. They've got tons of data on what works and what doesn't. They are the go-to people. My only concern is, can I pay their hourly rate? Yeah, I know they make a lot of money in their other gigs, so I don't know if I can match that.
We've got a winner.
There you go. Good job. Yes. I don't know if you're going to be able to pay their hourly rate. They might be too expensive for you. As I think we had one of our guests say, it's a question of when are you paying the ransomware, now or later? All right, two very good ones. That was both Craig Herder and Phil Wolf. Both of you stand by. In about 10 minutes, we're going to bring you both onto camera to defend why your bad idea was the worst. Let's go, though, to the questions that we have coming in. We've got a lot of people on board, so thank you very much. And everyone, by the way, please stick around for the meetup at the portion at the end. If you've never been to the meetup portion, it truly is the most fun part of this whole video chat. Just complete random meetings with another cybersecurity professional. 5 of them, 5-minute meetings. A lot of people have ended up doing business. They've gotten hired or hired someone because of this. It's great. And by the way, if you don't like the meeting with somebody, guess what? It's over in 5 minutes. But I will tell you, that's never happened to me. But I gather some people don't like some of their meetings. Who knows? By the way, Sanders' last name is pronounced Sliderink, which is now currently a question. It's not a question, Sandor. It's just a pronunciation of your last name. All right. Sandor, though, Sliderink asks this question. And I'll throw this to you, Travis. Going back to the M&A question, do you recommend using a third-party security team to focus specifically on M&A? What can a third-party team do that your security team couldn't do?
I guess it depends on, do we have the expertise in-house, and is this the best use of my team's time? So the way I like to think about either building or buying is this problem differentiated for my company? Like, is this something that uniquely, in this case, matters to Databricks? If it's not, I'm going to try to buy it. So I think, M&A security, if we're doing a ton of M&A, then we might have a security team that's specifically good at this. If we don't, outsource it. Get somebody that does this all day, every day. They'll probably be better at it and know exactly what to do.
I would think like the Googles of the world who are constantly consuming companies, they live and breathe this kind of stuff. But if it's your first M&A, go third party. Yes, Arik?
Yes, absolutely. It sounds exactly the approach I would take for very much the same reasons, right? Your people might be focusing on some projects. M&A comes in. It's always a sudden event, right? You never plan for that. It's always very secret before it's announced, so you can't really prepare. And now you have to pull people out of their projects, stall strategic projects, and get them running on some random process and some random infrastructure they don't know nothing about. So to Travis' point, why not pull someone who is an expert in doing exactly that?
Okay. I'm going to ask Andrew to please throw up the good idea poll as soon as you possibly can, because we want to see your good ideas as well. So done. Hold on. It is up, hopefully, the good ideas. Whoops. Closing that out. We are, just so you know, oh no, we got some time for that happened. Hold on. Polls. Do I see the good idea poll? My poll's still the bad idea poll. It's still not showing the good idea one. But I'll see that hopefully very shortly. Let's get back to our questions, though. Talk about role escalation and how this is tied into, essentially rights creep, if you will. People do change roles change, people do need access to new stuff. This gets into a management headache, I know. How do we become this? How does this become less of a headache? And also, does this always have to be handled by the security team? Can this be handled by people who are not in the security team? Arik.
So first of all, yes, it does not have to be necessarily handled by the security team. Actually, most of it is handled day to day by cloud operations teams, developer teams. It's only the oversight and the security risk that the security team should be aware of, right? And what we see a lot in, at least in public cloud infrastructure, is that you have identities, could be users, could be application accounts, service accounts, roles, that can assume higher, more privileged identities, right, and roles, and use them. Now, in many cases, they never do, and nobody is aware of that. And this is exactly the process through which a potential threat actor can escalate their privilege in your environment. Now, mapping all that and getting visibility to all that is key if you want to understand your identity and access management risk, right? And this is part of what we're doing in Hermetic, right? This is a part of visibility that we are providing to our customers. Now, once you've identified that anyone can take care of it. In most cases, actually, the product or the developer teams are much better positioned doing that rather than the security teams, because they really understand the environment and they can really quickly decide if this is a feature or a bug. And if it's a bug, then just to remediate it pretty quickly.
I said vote for your favorite bad idea in the chat. I realized I meant to say vote for your favorite good idea, because the good idea poll is up. So my mistake on my part. Hey, here's a good idea that's getting voted up very heavily right this second. Create custom roles for your organization, which leverage the multitude of built-in roles appropriately, and assign those bonus points for using the same role names as your on-premise roles. I like that. By the way, speak up if that was yours. How do you handle creating roles, Travis?
Yeah, so I am a big advocate for the default, get developers or applications or whatever, get a profile set up for them. So this is a data accessing application. It should have some basic S3 stuff. Or, this team is a member of engineering, and engineering typically needs these. And then once you have that starting point, really, apply the gravity and right size down based on usage.
All right, let's invite our two bad idea, essentially not winners, but the people who had the two bad ideas that were voted up the most, or that I chose. Actually, one about claiming that the cloud service provider was going to do all the security for them was not a bad idea. It was just a sort of a claim right there in general, which, by the way, we know this is all bogus in general. So we need Craig. There's Craig Herder, and we also need Phil Wolf on board as well. And so what they're going to do, Craig and Phil, they are going to defend why their bad idea is worse. And it's your job, Travis and Eric, to determine which one of their horrible ideas was really the worst. Now, one of the things we always discover on this show is that sometimes these bad ideas are actually from real experience. This is more therapy. They're expressing their pain for having had to deal with it. Where the heck is Phil? Has the invite been sent to Phil? I guess it has been, Andrew. So there comes Phil. All right, we got him on. There's Phil. There's Craig. All right, Phil, I believe you had the very first bad idea. Remind us which one it was.
Ticket-based access control.
I thought it was very creative. Okay, argue why your idea is the worst.
Because the people that actually need access often aren't verbal and can't stand your ticketing system.
So they won't explain what they actually need?
Or they don't even participate in reporting outages and problems. So it's, ticketing is really bad.
So you'll only see a small
percentage
of the problem, right? You'll only see a small percentage. Okay, that actually we didn't address that part. That's actually an interesting point. Craig, why is your idea the worst? And again, remind us again what it was.
My idea was using Revel to consult on how to build out your infrastructure. I think why it's the best bad idea is simply because you're not going to be able to afford them. That's true, but you're going to pay ransom in the front or in the back. So you may as well,
or possibly both ends,
So by engaging them early, you're at least buying yourself time. It's almost like a qualifier for cyber insurance. If Revel has already assessed your environment, you qualify for cyber insurance.
Or let me throw this out: maybe they will protect you from other ransomware, just not them. So you'll have limited your scope of attackers. That's another possibility. What makes it good? All right, I throw this to you, Eric and Travis. Which one of these two horrible ideas do you think is the worst, and why? And again, it's a risk management exercise. We know they're both terrible, but which one would cause the most damage, Eric?
So the Revel one, I think, right? It's literally paying protection, and the problem is that there is more than one group right out there. So you will pay one, and then the second one will come after you, and then the third, and then the fourth, and before
you're only hiring one.
Exactly, but you will be paying everyone else as well, right? So
okay. All right, what do you think, Travis? Are you agreeing? Is it Revel? By the way, Revel or Ravel or Revel, or I have no idea how to pronounce them. Then again, does it matter? Are we obliged to pronounce the bad guys' names correctly? Travis. Anyways, which one do you think is worse here?
Yeah, also Revel. I think the only way out of ransomware is to stop them from getting paid. I would actually be in favor of making it illegal to pay ransom, or making it so that you have to apply or something like that. And so, yeah, the more side income streams that these gangs get, the more gangs there's going to be. And we just need them to go away. So, yeah, definitely don't pay the bad guys, please.
By the way, I saw this. I don't know if I think it may have actually been a bill that's been proposed about making ransomware illegal, because we talked about this on an episode of the CISO series video chat, or CISO security vendor relationship video chat. I'm sorry, the podcast, not the video chat, the podcast. And we saw the huge damage of requiring it, of requiring or making it illegal to pay. But I think it's good in theory. I don't know if it would work in practice. But regardless, Travis, you win for the worst idea. Kudos on that. But Phil, you're going to get my my kudos on having the most creative idea, because I do like the creativity of a ticket-based permission system. I do like that. Just operate on when people start complaining. Because actually, thinking about it this way, going back to you, think about it this way. If you should literally shut everything down on a weekend, or correct me if I'm wrong, you're opening everything up or shutting everything down? What are we doing? We're doing one or the other here. Phil, what are we doing? Shutting it all down? Okay, so what you've got, your baseline is 100% security. Your baseline is you're not operating as a business, but that's your baseline. So you're slowly opening up your business and your security. So I don't think it's that horrible an idea. I think there's some merit here. I kind of like it. All right, Phil, Craig, you can take them away, Andrew. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys.
All right. Let's get to the questions at hand. I want to dig down back into this third party thing, Eric. And can we just isolate how this works with a third party? What does a permission to one third party app? We're talking about an app now here, not necessarily, a third party, but a third party. How does that affect your environment? Once I start doing that, what are the considerations I have to take into place?
Right. So let's say you have a cloud infrastructure, right? And you're working with a vendor. Usually those are, software as a service vendors that provide you a variety of capabilities that relate to a cloud infrastructure environment. That could be security capability like Hermetic. By the way, that could be Databricks that you're working with, and you're giving them access to your environment to do some data analysis work. That could be someone who helps you manage and optimize your cloud infrastructure environment cost, right? They basically help you manage your machines in a better way, or services generally, and minimize your cost. Now, to do that job, they really have to get visibility into your environment. Also, in some cases, more privileges. Some of them might want to access your data or start spinning up and down infrastructure. For example, that's what Databricks are doing with some of their customers, for example, right? For them to do that, you really have to give them the permissions to do that. So basically, you're creating an identity in your environment, an identity for the third party, and you grant the third party permissions to use that identity within your environment. And you have to grant that identity permissions to do their work in your environment, right? So eventually what happens is that they have an identity that they can access like any user in your organization, and do some tasks with the permissions that they have. The problem is that these permissions, as Travis mentioned, tend to be extremely sensitive, and in many cases unnecessarily so, because vendors ask for more permissions that they actually require, right? So sorry, go ahead.
No, I want to ask you a question, just so I'm understanding, and I guess this is the way Hermetic works. Are you saying that there is my platform of permissions, and whatever sort of, and again, and if I'm describing this incorrectly, please explain. I have my platform of permissions, and I'm controlling that, and that's really my gold standard, if you will. So all the permissions that are happening on the third-party cloud provider, they can sort of go haywire, we not wanting it, but ultimately what matters is the gold standard of how it accesses to my environment. Am I getting that correct or no?
Not exactly. So
Okay.
you're hosted on the cloud provider, right? This is where your infrastructure is, right? Now, for someone external to your environment, for a third party to access your environment, you have to create basically a user for them, right? You can think of that in this way, right? And this user can be used by someone, a human external to your organization, but in most cases, it is used by an application, a vendor you're working with, right? Like Databricks, for example, right? And that user has permissions on your environment to do its job. Now you are granting those permissions within your environment. You're actually the one controlling which permissions they would have and which permissions they wouldn't have, right? It's only, the question is, get a good understanding who are all these external users that have access to your environment, and give them the right permissions and monitor the way they're using those permissions to determine if any of those users are compromised or not, right? So you don't want to give them admin to your environment. And if suddenly they start deviating from their baseline activity, you'll probably want to ask some questions, right? These are kind of the ways to go about it, generally speaking. And again, this is exactly what we're doing with Hermetic.
All right. So Travis, let me ask you, when you started looking down this road of dealing with permissions in general, what was your frustration that you were dealing with early on, that you're feeling that we're tackling this at a better level today that we weren't, a few years ago?
Yes. So when we started on this, when I was working at Netflix, there was really no solutions in the marketplace for anything like this. Amazon provided Access Advisor data, which is the perfect data source to start doing this kind of work. Amazon's had CloudTrail before, so the primitives that you needed existed, and there was no solutions. This is something that's the same for everybody. So, going back to what I said earlier, I would prefer to buy this, and there just wasn't anything to buy. So I had to create this, for Netflix. We had to create this internally. And today what's changed is that, one, there's a lot more visibility into the problems. Some kind of like banner breaches have really called out how bad it is when application issues escalate to cloud issues. And the other is that there's a lot of solutions available today that weren't before. GCP has a feature that kind of, exposes a lot of this data too that didn't exist before. So I think this has really come to the forefront, and there's a lot more options today, such as Hermetic, that didn't exist when I started on this path.
Okay. All right, just want to remind everybody, the link at the bottom of the screen is to register for next week's video chat. If you have not done that, please go ahead and do that now, because that is going to change in just about 4 minutes for our meetup portion, which I want everybody to stick around for. Let me actually just go to, I want to just address this last good idea that came in, which, by the way, we see this good idea again and again and again, and it may be the same person who's been posting it, so please pipe up. But I know they're not the first one to say it, but the crawl before you walk or run to the cloud. We hear this all the time. If you don't have the budget to allocate the resources to get you there quickly, then create a more long-term gradual roadmap in order to ensure you have the proper assessment, threat model, and ability to put in the policies, controls, and audits in place. Is there a crawl version of permissions? Is it really just doling out permissions slowly, Eric?
I would say that in the cloud, unfortunately, it's not very realistic. The cloud is built for developers, and developers need permissions to do their work, right? So this way or another, you will be immediately granting them very sensitive permissions, right? So you cannot really hold this door for a long time in the cloud, right? It's immediately open, and it's all the question: how can you manage that once it's open?
Yeah, I'm assuming you believe the same way, Travis. I mean, there's just, once you're opening up the door, you got to handle it, right?
If you start just doling them out individually, your developers are going to hate you. So it's not a viable approach, and you'll just be buried in obsolete all the time.
Okay, good point. All right, let me do this. I'm gonna wrap up this, and then I'm gonna want your final thoughts on this topic, and then we're gonna go into our meetup portion right now. So everyone, hang tight right now as I wrap up our show. And by the way, everyone's going to stick around for our meetup. So Andrew, you can change that link at the bottom of the screen, because I want everyone to stick around for our meetup, that's the link for next week, but that is going to change in just a moment for, there it is. Now it is. If you click that link, which, by the way, you can click that link right now. Please feel free to click that link right now and that will open up a window. Just log on, put your full name in, and that's when we have our meetup, a series of one-on-one random meetups. Hey, tell your friends to join us. We do this every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. We were off for 2 weeks in a row, actually, so we had a 3-week hiatus, but we moved. We're now in the San Diego area, And also we had Black Hat and DEF CON that we did not want to compete with at all. I want to say a huge thanks to our sponsor, Hermetic. Thank you so much, Hermetic. And also a huge thanks to our two guests, both Travis and Eric from Hermetic, Travis from Databricks. By the way, do you want to sponsor a video chat yourself? Guess what? You can do that. Just email me at david@cisoseries.com. In fact, we just sold a bunch of them, so we have availability starting in late October. All right, now we have, how much time left? We have 5 minutes. So I'm going to ask your final advice on this topic of hacking cloud infrastructure. I will start with you, Eric. For someone who is not started, halfway there, but struggling, what's your advice at all those stages?
Sure, absolutely. So if you haven't started, I would recommend to learn a little bit before you go, especially on the differences between cloud infrastructure and on-prem infrastructure. Again, on-prem identity was important, but not as important it is in the cloud. Network was more important. So trying to really understand what are the key differences and how you should build your cloud security roadmap as opposed to your on-prem security roadmap. If you have started with your approach to the cloud, I would say get the controls over your identity and access management in the cloud as soon as possible, because this is exactly the one area that you cannot go, you cannot crawl before you run. You actually start running there on day one. And if you're already there, I'm promising you have a ton of things to look at. So really getting visibility into your risks in IAM and prioritizing them, focusing on the most important ones and remediating them quickly. So to make sure you have a pretty clean environment and you're not going to make the billboards of, tomorrow with another breach or Revel or something like that. That's probably a good idea.
All right. I throw this one to you, Travis. Travis, what's your advice for those three stages? You haven't begun, you're halfway in it, you're deep in it, and it's driving you crazy.
Haven't begun, definitely talk to people that have been down the path before. People have experienced this pain, and if they tell you about it, you can avoid those mistakes. So do that. And then if you're in, then cloud security is just kind of a rehash of the same old security problems that we've always had. How do we know what assets we have? How do we know when those assets change to a bad state? So come up with some kind of a baseline way of measuring that, whether it's a vendor product or a program you run yourself or an assessment. You definitely want to stay on top of the basics. And then, at the tail end, like this problem never ends. So once you solve the 5 or 10 biggest problems you have today, there will be a new 5 or 10 biggest problems. So, recognize that this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Buckle in for the long haul and plan the most strategic work that you can.
Excellent advice. Awesome. I got to thank the two of you. That was great. A great episode to come back to after a few weeks off. Huge thanks to Eric Gamanovsky, who is with Hermetic. By the way, do you want to make any last pitch, any offer to our audience? Yes, Eric?
Sure, absolutely.
How to follow up with you if they're interested, and hopefully they'll meet up with you in this meetup afterwards. What's your pitch?
Absolutely. Please come on to www.hermetic.com. We're just launched a new cool website, and we're there. Please contact us, and we're happy to talk to you about cloud infrastructure security in general, and about identity and access management in the cloud. And you are more than welcome to contact me directly at eric.hermetic.com.
Awesome. And Travis, I'm sorry, you get it. I'm sorry, he was just doing that. All right, thank you, everybody. Okay, we just have a few seconds left. I want to thank everyone. Please click on the link on the bottom of the screen. We want to see you in the meetup. It's a lot of fun. Don't miss out on it. All right, Andrew, take us out. Thank you, gentlemen. Bye, everybody.